It all starts on a quiet evening. When the moon was a silver cradle in the sky, the trees whispered secrets only the stars could hear. A little town nestled between rolling hills and fields that danced with fireflies, a warm breeze drifted lazily through the sleepy streets. It rustled the curtains of old wooden houses, kissed the wind chimes hanging from porches, and stirred the scent of blooming jasmine that lingered in the air like a gentle lullaby. You are safe now, you are warm, and you are here with me as we gently drift into a story that glows with quiet love, an unseen sacrifice. Tonight I want to tell you the story of Lena. Her voice was as soft as the night wind, and her heart, oh, it was a place of silent miracles. She was the kind of soul who felt more than most, the kind of girl who walked barefoot in the garden just to feel the earth whisper beneath her toes, and a sleepy oak tree that stood watch outside her bedroom window. That house, like Lena, carried a gentle sadness, a quiet hush that lived in its corners and creaked through its floorboards. She lived in a small house on the edge of town, a cottage wrapped in ivy with a rusted gate because, inside that house, the kind who gave away his umbrella when it rained. He had a voice like warm cocoa and a smile that made strangers feel like old friends, in a room just beyond the kitchen. Lay a man once full of laughter, now stilled by illness, Lena's father, Thomas. He had once been a schoolteacher, the kind who stayed after class to help the shy ones, but now his voice came in whispers, and his smile only flickered on tired days when Lena read to him under the yellow glow of a bedside lamp. He was sick. Not in the way that passes like a cold breeze, but in the way that settles in and stays. She cared for him. She brewed herbal tea, folded blankets, hummed lullabies he once sang to her when she was little, for they couldn't afford the heating bill this month, a quiet, slow illness that demanded medicine they could no longer afford. And so, quietly, gently, Lena began to give. Not in grand, thunderous ways, but in the soft, invisible ways that love often does, patched and worn with a missing button near the wrist. During the day, but when the sky deepened into indigo and the stars blinked open like shy eyes, she scrubbed dishes until her hands were raw. Lena would slip on her coat, not the warm one, but the old one. And while her father dreamed in quiet fits, and he, around 4 a.m., proud and tired, believed her, Lena would walk under the hush of midnight or feel guilty. Every ache to a small diner at the far edge of town, where the lights were always a little too bright, the coffee always smelled a little burnt. But it was work. Like they too were stretching into the morning. She never told her father. She didn't want him to worry. She told him she'd taken up writing, that she was staying up late to finish a book. Each night, she cleared plates with smiling couples and yawning truckers. She earned tips and crumpled bills, saved every cent. When the shift ended, Lena would walk home slowly, the streets quiet as a lullaby, her eyes heavy, but her soul steady, because every step was for him. She needed to believe in hope. For the medicine, for a chance. And as she reached their little cottage, the first birds would begin to sing, the sun still stretching. Soft and sleepy, she would slip off her shoes, kiss her father's forehead, and curl up beside his bed, just as the world began to wake. It had been 3 months since Lena began her silent routine. 3 months of quiet footsteps in the dark. 3 months of folded paychecks tucked away in an envelope she hid beneath a loose floorboard in her room. And 3 months of pretending. She pretended she wasn't tired. She pretended the ache in her feet didn't matter. She pretended that everything was okay, because her father needed to believe in something soft. And she, well, the autumn days had grown colder. The trees outside the cottage were painting the ground in gold and rust. Leaves whispered as they fell, soft papery sighs against the earth. Inside, Lena moved gently, careful not to wake her father as she placed a steaming bowl of oatmeal by his bedside. He stirred, eyelids fluttering like tired wings. Morning already? He rasped. She smiled, brushing a hand over his forehead. Just barely, she whispered. He chuckled, weak but warm, still stretching, ... like my old bones. They shared a laugh, quiet, delicate. The kind that doesn't disturb the stillness, but settles into it like a blanket. Lena fed him slowly, her fingers trembling just slightly from a sleepless night. But Thomas didn't notice. His world had grown smaller, a few feet of blankets, pill bottles, and the soft light of his daughter's care, she whispered. And in that little world, Lena shone, stubborn as a mule and soft as a peach. He didn't see the calluses on her hands, or the faint bruises on her wrist from where a tray had slipped at the diner. In that greasy, fluorescent-lit diner, he only saw her smile. He believed, truly believed, that she was working on a book. He often asked about it, eyes sparkling with pride, as snow began to fall like feathers from a silver sky. "What's the story about?" he'd ask. And Lena would weave tales on the spot. Magical lands, brave girls, talking trees, but never once mentioned the real story unfolding each night. She could schedule the treatment, the one written in tired footsteps and whispered prayers. One night, as winter crept closer and the wind began to hum through the cracks in the windows, Lena stood at the diner sink, her hands lost in soapy water, when her boss, Greta, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, approached. "You look pale, sweetheart," Greta said softly, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder. "Please, you sure you're okay to work the double shift?" Lena smiled faintly. "I'm fine, really. Just a little cold." Greta studied her for a moment, then reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a pair of warm gloves, soft, woolen, and clearly hand-knitted, staring at the ceiling, but not quite seeing. A soft smile touching his lips. "Sweetheart." He lied gently, slipping beside him. She peeled off her coat, tiptoed into her father's room. "Here," she said. "These were my daughters. She moved to Florida. Won't need 'em there. Grown up but little again. Both at once. Funny, isn't it?" Lena blinked, touched. The gloves were warm even before she slipped them on. "Thank you," she whispered. "Warm and steady." Greta nodded. "You remind me of her." They both laughed, tired and true. And for a moment, Lena didn't feel quite so invisible. Later that night, Lena walked home under the hush of midnight, his hand searching for hers. The world outside Lena's home was white and still, with only the occasional crow or creaking branch breaking the silence. "Like always," he murmured, his voice slow and fragile. The town was quiet, muffled by snow. Each step she took left a delicate print that would vanish by morning. She didn't notice the cold anymore. She was thinking about the envelope beneath the floorboard, but she didn't let them fall. It was getting thicker. Almost enough. "Maybe by next week," she asked softly. Her heart beat faster with hope. With a hush that wrapped the town in winter's arms, the stars above twinkled like they were listening, watching over her quiet bravery. The melody older, she whispered into the night, just a little longer, as if the wind itself could carry her wish to someone who could grant it. Inside the cottage, and paused. He was awake. His eyes open, Dad. He turned slowly toward her. "You're home late," her breath caught. Had he noticed? "I was writing, got lost in the story." Closed his eyes. She placed it in his. It smelled of peppermint and clean paper. The kind that came from someone who had learned to carry other people's pain with grace. "I had a dream you were," she said softly. She was ready. Lena's throat tightened. "What was I doing?" she said, her voice quiet but clear. Once or twice to ask questions. He smiled faintly. "Saving me." Tears welled in her eyes, the soft flakes that landed in her hair and on her lashes. Clinic with as she served her father soup. She couldn't stop smiling. She'd ate. 3 days from now, and her steps less heavy. Card with details, she'd be off.
"Already memorized?"
But her eyes filled with tears. "Not yet," she said. "Not tonight." She kissed his forehead and sang a lullaby he used to sing when she was 5. The words were old. The snow began to fall again, but it still worked. He drifted off. She let herself hope. Feels like something good is coming. And Lena sat in the silence, holding his hand, her heart full of snowflakes and secrets. The days rolled on like slow-moving clouds. He asked, her shift at the diner felt different, lifting a spoon shakily. Soft and pale, morning light came late now, filtering gently through the frost-tipped windows. Inside, time moved differently. Thomas's breaths had grown slower, but steadier. Some days he spoke more clearly. Other days he drifted in and out like a boat at sea. Like the wind, she paused. Sometimes shifts when we least expect. But through it all, Lena remained steady. The lighthouse that never blinked. Just a good day. The envelope beneath her floorboard. It was full now. Hank looked up from his coffee and said she had counted it 3 times that morning. It was true. Just enough for the treatment, and maybe even a little left over for a warm blanket or a better chair for her father's room. She stood over the floorboard, heart pounding like soft rain against a tin roof. Today could be the day. But something tugged at her. A quiet thread of fear. What if it didn't work? What if it was too late? What if, after all of it, she still lost him? She sat on the edge of her bed, gloves still on, her breath a whisper in the cold air. If they don't respond by tonight, we can offer the spot to someone else. For tomorrow? Outside, the oak tree groaned gently in the wind, its bare limbs like old hands reaching toward the sky. She pressed her palm to her chest, grounding herself. Just breathe, she told herself, like you're telling the story to him. And slowly, the fear softened, not vanished, but softened, like snow melting under the warmth of a lamp. Later that afternoon, Lena wrapped the envelope in brown paper and tucked it deep into her satchel. She told her father she had a meeting at the library. More writing work, she said. He smiled. Get him, Tiger, he whispered, his voice thin but teasing. She laughed gently and kissed his cheek. I'll be back before dinner. As she stepped outside, the cold met her like an old friend. The snow crunched beneath her boots as she walked down the sleepy lane toward the clinic. Each breath left a small cloud behind her, but her steps were steady, her mind wrapped around the hope that just maybe this would change everything. The clinic was small, tucked between a florist and a tailor shop. Inside, a woman behind the counter greeted her with a warm smile. You must be Lena. Lena nodded. She had come before, but today, I have the payment, and I'd like to schedule the treatment. The woman nodded gently. She took the bundle from Lena's hands with care, then reached over and squeezed her fingers. You're doing a beautiful thing, Lena smiled. No one had said those words out loud before. Left as she walked home thick, she tilted her face toward the sky and closed her eyes for just a moment. The wind brushed past her cheeks like a whisper. And in that stillness, that evening, what's gotten into you? She shook her head. Just Thomas chuckled. Maybe your book's about to be published. She laughed, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of joy she hadn't felt in months. Maybe it is. That night she moved a little lighter. Even the regulars noticed. One of the old truckers, someone win the lottery or something. Lena just smiled. Nope. And for once, but fate, on her walk home. Long past midnight, the snow had thickened into a blur. The streetlights glowed faint and golden through the white mist, and Lena wrapped her scarf tighter around her face. She reached the gate to the cottage. Something felt. There was no light in the window. No soft glow from the lamp she always left on by her father's bed. She rushed inside, dropped her bag, ran to his room. And there he was, still, his eyes closed, breathing, but shallow. Dad, she whispered, heart racing. She touched his forehead, too cold. She grabbed a blanket, tucked it around him, tried to stir him gently. His eyes fluttered open, just barely. Lena, he murmured. You're late tonight, she choked back a sob. I'm here now. She held his hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. The hope she had felt just hours before now trembled like a candle in the wind. The night passed slowly, like honey dripped onto cold stone, thick, unyielding, quiet. Lena didn't sleep. She sat by her father's side, her hands never leaving his. She whispered soft things into the space between them. Lullabies, memories, the names of flowers he once planted. The storm outside had settled into a soft rhythm, snow tapping lightly on the window pane like a clock counting down. Time felt both frozen and fragile, as if the night itself was holding its breath. By morning, Thomas was still alive, but paler. His breaths came shallow and slow, like they were being borrowed from somewhere far away. Lena brewed tea with trembling hands. She placed the cup beside his bed, though he wasn't strong enough to lift it. She touched his cheek with her gloved fingers. I'm here, she whispered. We're so close, Dad. Just 3 more days. He blinked, slow, tired, and nodded. A small, almost imperceptible nod. But it was enough to keep her going. Later that afternoon, as the light slipped through the blinds in soft golden slants, Lena stood at the kitchen counter with a quiet determination. She could not lose him now. She made a call to the clinic, asked if they could move the appointment sooner. The nurse on the other end listened kindly but explained the earliest opening was still 3 days away. "Les, there's one possibility," the nurse said softly.
No.
There was a cancellation, but the patient was on a priority list. If they don't respond by tonight, we can offer the spot to someone else. For tomorrow. Lena's heart leaped. What time? 9:30 a.m. I'll take it. She hung up, her heart beating a steady drum. One more night, that's all she needed. She returned to her father's side and held his hand. Tomorrow, she whispered. You hold on, okay? Just until tomorrow. He gave the faintest squeeze. And in that moment, she allowed herself to believe, really believe, that everything might just be okay. Lena nodded. Almost there, she whispered. Greta didn't ask what that meant. She just gave her shoulder a small squeeze and went back to the kitchen. By 4:15 a.m., Lena was walking home through a world of white. The snow hadn't stopped, but it had softened, now falling like dust, like feathers shaken loose from the clouds. Her boots left temporary prints in the powder, each one a step closer to tomorrow. When she reached the cottage, the moon was still high. Watching, she opened the door slowly, stopped. There was light in the living room, soft, warm, and her father's voice, faintly singing. She stepped inside, confused, heart thudding. He was sitting up, not much, but more than he had in days, blankets wrapped tight around him, a cup of tea half sipped on the table. Dad? She breathed. He turned his head and smiled, truly smiled. I couldn't sleep, he whispered. Thought I'd wait up for you. Her throat tightened. She walked over slowly and knelt beside him. Why? His eyes shimmered. I know, she blinked. What do you mean? I know you're not writing a book, Lena. She froze. I may be sick. But I'm not blind, he said gently. The dishes in the sink at dawn. It's the smell of grease in your hair. The way you yawn during breakfast. She looked down, ashamed. I didn't want you to feel like a burden. He cupped her cheek with trembling fingers. I feel loved, not burdened. The dam broke. And just like that, tears streamed down her face. She rested her forehead against his shoulder and cried. For the weight, the fear, the nights alone, the aching hope. He held her as best he could, though his arms had little strength, and together they sat in the quiet. The fire in the hearth crackled softly. Outside, the snow fell like dreams. That morning came slow and quiet. The sky outside was a soft gray, like the underside of a dove's wing. Snow still blanketed the rooftops, untouched and glowing faintly in the morning light. Inside the cottage, Lena gently helped her father dress. His movements were slow, but more alive than they'd been in days. She buttoned his coat over 2 layers of sweaters, wrapped a thick scarf around his neck, and pulled a woolen hat over his thinning hair. Every movement was done with care, like she was wrapping something precious. Something fragile, but still full of light. Think I remember how to walk? Thomas joked, his voice rough but playful. Lena chuckled and steadied his arm. Let's take it one step at a time. The taxi arrived just after 8. An old boxy thing, with a kind driver who helped lift Thomas gently into the back seat. As they pulled away from the cottage, Lena looked back. Snowflakes swirled in the wind behind them like petals caught in a dance. She squeezed her father's hand. He looked at her, eyes tired but shining. You know, he said, I always wanted to be the one who saved you. She smiled through her tears. You already did, Dad. Every single day. The clinic was warm and welcoming. Soft music playing in the background, chairs cushioned and arranged like a cozy living room. No sharp edges, no cold metal, just peace. The nurse from the phone call greeted them with a soft smile and a clipboard. We've been expecting you. They helped Thomas into a recliner, surrounded by quiet machines and monitors that hummed like lullabies. Lena sat beside him, her hand in his, never letting go. The treatment began. A slow drip of medicine and hope, each drop like a quiet promise. The hours passed gently. Outside, the wind picked up again. Inside, Lena read from a worn paperback. Her father drifted in and out, sometimes listening, sometimes resting. It was the first real stillness they'd had together in a long time. No pretending, No hiding, just being. By late afternoon, the treatment was complete. The doctor came in, calm and reassuring. He explained what they should expect: possible side effects, the slow return of strength, more appointments to come. But most of all, there was hope. Real steady hope. Thomas nodded, listening quietly. Lena sat frozen, holding on to every word like it was a thread she might braid into tomorrow. When they left the clinic, the snow had stopped. The clouds were parting, just a little, revealing the pale golden edges of the sun, soft as the breath of morning. Back at the cottage, Lena tucked her father into bed. He was tired, but his color had returned just a bit, and his hand, when it held hers, was warmer than it had been in days. "Do you believe in miracles?" he asked sleepily. Lena smiled, brushing a hand through his hair. "I believe in you." He chuckled faintly. "That's better than a miracle, I suppose." He closed his eyes and for the first time in many nights, slept without coughing. Lena sat beside him for a while, just listening to the silence. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, like the hush of snow falling on open fields. She tiptoed to her own room, slipped off her boots, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her fingers reached beneath the floorboard, but the space it had occupied felt sacred. She whispered into the stillness, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Maybe to the stars, maybe to the wind, maybe just to the part of her heart that never gave up. Outside, the moon rose quietly. Its light spilled across the windowsill like silver lace. The wind, now softer, moved through the trees and whispered. The next few days passed slowly, but peacefully. The kind of peace that grows quietly like moss on stone. Fast, soft, unspoken, and full of grace. Thomas was still weak, but something had changed. There was color in his cheeks. He laughed a little more. Not much, but enough. Each morning, Lena helped him sit up with a little less effort. Each evening, he needed fewer pills. The cottage, once filled with silence and sighs, now held the gentle rustle of healing, whined through the curtains. The kettles sang Lena's soft humming while she swept the floor. Hope had found a seat at their kitchen table. One afternoon, as the light melted gold across the windowsill, Thomas turned to his daughter and said, "You know what I miss most?" Lena looked up from folding laundry. "What's that?" "Taking walks. Long, lazy ones. Through the fields near the edge of town." He smiled wistfully, just listening to the leaves, smelling the grass. "Saying hello to old dogs and nosy birds." Lena chuckled, a warm sound. "I remember those. You'd always collect rocks," he added. "Swore each one was a treasure." "They were," she teased, placing a towel in the basket. "They still are." He looked toward the window. "Think I'll walk again?" She crossed the room and knelt beside him. "I know you will." And somehow, saying it made it feel true. That night, Lena didn't go to the diner. Greta had insisted she'd take the evening off. "Go home, rest. You've earned it," she said with a wink. "You've been glowing like a firefly these days," so Lena did, though she hardly read a page. For the first time in months, she curled up on the old couch in front of the fireplace, a thick blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The world was wrapped in velvet night. In that little pool of warmth and flame, a book open in her lap. The fire crackled softly. Shadows danced on the walls like gentle storytellers, healthy and laughing, and outside, she fell asleep there, and in her dreams, she walked barefoot through a field of soft grass. They were both whole. Her father stood ahead of her, calling her name with arms wide open. The wind carried his voice like a song. Birds soared overhead. The fire was glowing low, the sun was warm, stretched, and padded toward her father's room. And in that dream, when she awoke and soft light filtered in through the curtains, morning had arrived, slow and pale. She stood. He was still asleep. It felt like miles, beaming, and tiptoed to the kitchen, gripping the walker with both hands. A peaceful expression on his face, breath deep and steady. She smiled. Thomas took 5 steps. Breakfast was simple: porridge with honey, warm toast, a sliced apple. But it felt like a feast. Later that day, sketching little images in a notebook, she whispered, steadying his elbow, "Just 5. But to Lena, she clapped softly. He gave a sheepish bow. "I feel like I'm learning to walk again. Kind of are, and I'm here for every step." The days became gentle rhythms. Gratitude, she'd answer with a smile, waking. while they were watching the snow fall. Tea, medicines, storytelling, short walks. Sometimes Thomas would nap while Lena sat nearby. She drew trees, shoes by the door, alert, a steaming bowl of soup. All the small things that had become sacred. Sometimes he would wake and catch her. Not soon, but someday. I want you to live for yourself. What are you drawing now? Just... One evening, Thomas turned to her and asked softly, "Will you promise me something?" Lena looked over, of course. "When I'm gone, not now," her breath caught. "Don't spend your whole life in the shadows of sacrifice," he continued gently. "You have more to give the world than what you give to me." She didn't speak. Tears welled up in her eyes. He reached for her hand. "You gave me back time, a gift I can never repay." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You don't have to." Outside, the snow began to fall again. Not heavy, not harsh, just soft, quiet flakes drifting slowly from the sky like blessings from above. The cottage had changed. Not in any visible way. The creaky floorboards still groaned in the same places. The little oak outside still brushed against Lena's window on windy nights, and the fire still whispered in its quiet language each evening. But the feeling inside had changed. There was warmth now, not just from the fire or the tea kettle, but in the spaces between breaths. In the silences that no longer felt heavy, there was healing. And even though the snow still fell and the nights were still long, Lena no longer carried that ache in her chest, the one made of fear and waiting and silent worry. Now there was space for something else. Joy. Not loud, dancing joy, but the kind that hums gently beneath everything. The kind you feel when the world is quiet and all the people you love are safe. Thomas began walking a little more each day, just a few steps, then 10, then from one end of the cottage to the other. He joked that soon he'd be jogging laps around the garden. Lena laughed and made him promise to wait until the snow melted. Each evening, after his nap, she read to him. Old favorites, mostly. Books that smelled like dust and memory. Stories that wrapped around them like warm blankets. And sometimes, he'd fall asleep mid-sentence. His head tilted, mouth slightly open, breathing peacefully. Those were Lena's favorite moments. She'd close the book, set it gently on the table, and just sit there, watching the snow fall through the window, holding on to the stillness. One morning, the snow stopped. The sky stretched wide and pale blue, and for the first time in weeks, sunlight spilled across the front porch. Lena opened the door and let the light in. A oak tree shimmered with tiny icicles, its branches glittering like stars trapped in daylight. Thomas shuffled to the doorway with his walker. He leaned there, blinking into the sun. He murmured, "I forgot what real light looks like." Lena smiled. "Just took a break. It never went away." He nodded slowly. "And now it's back." That afternoon, just like her mother used to make, she made him his favorite soup, potato and leek. She stirred it slowly on the stove, the scent filling every room with something sacred and familiar. When she brought it to him, he cradled the bowl like it was treasure. He said between spoonfuls, "You know, I think you cook even better than your mother did." Lena laughed. He chuckled. "She'd haunt you for saying that." Lena stepped out onto the porch alone. "I hope she does. It would be nice to see her again." The laughter faded into a gentle silence, not sadness, just remembering. That evening the air was crisp, and the sky above was a blanket of stars. She tilted her head back and closed her eyes. She thought about all the nights she had walked through snow. All the times she had stood beneath this sky, she whispered something different, asking silently for strength. Now, thank you. For the first time, she didn't feel tired. Have more left to give, not like before. This kind of tired was soft, kind that comes after building something. "After loving something so fully that you'd give every breath?" he asked, as she tucked her father in, and still somehow. "That night, I want to hear what I missed." He reached for her hand. "Will you read one of your stories tonight?" Ink stains. Lena blinked. "My stories," he nodded. "The ones you told me you were writing when you were sneaking off to work." He grinned. Beneath her pillow, she hesitated, then walked to her room. There was a small brown notebook, frayed edges and pages full of things she had never said out loud. She brought it back, sat beside him, and opened to the first page. Her voice was soft, the room quieter still. The fire hummed its steady lullaby. Lena read, Once upon a time, in a small cottage at the edge of a snowy town, there lived a girl who walked through the night, not to chase dreams but to build them for someone else. Her father closed his eyes, a single tear slipping from the corner, and she read on, word by word, line by line, letting the story carry them into something like sleep. The nights grew softer, not warmer, not yet, but quieter, gentler. The kind of nights that arrived like a soft breath and wrapped everything in hush. In the cottage, peace had become part of the furniture, settled on the blankets, floated in the steam of early morning tea, and curled in the corners of the living room like a sleeping cat. Thomas was growing stronger. He still tired easily, but he smiled more, laughed more. And sometimes when Lena caught him staring out the window with misty eyes, he'd whisper things like, "I didn't think I'd still be here." To which Lena would always reply, "I did," and she'd squeeze his hand, as if her belief alone had tethered him to this world. One afternoon, as a soft rain tapped gently on the roof, the first in weeks since the snow, Thomas asked, "Do you remember the old piano?" Lena blinked. "In the school auditorium." He nodded. "You used to sneak in and play it when I stayed late for parent-teacher meetings. Thought I didn't know." She laughed. "It had a key that stuck. Always had to smack it with my elbow." He smiled, eyes half closed. "You played like you were telling the piano a secret." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "I still do, just in different ways now." Later that week, Lena ventured into the attic. She hadn't been up there in over a year. Dust floated in slants of sunlight as she opened the creaky hatch. The smell of old books, cedar, and thyme wrapped around her like a shawl. She pulled out a cardboard box labeled Mum's Things and sat cross-legged on the wooden floor. Inside a small bottle of perfume, a scarf with a lavender scent still clinging to it. A yellowed envelope containing a pressed flower and a letter. She didn't open the letter. Not yet. But she placed it gently in her lap and let her fingers run across her mother's handwriting. She remembered her mother's voice, warm, always humming, always baking something sweet. She remembered how her parents would dance in the kitchen, slow and silly, as if they were still teenagers in love. Lena wiped her eyes, closed the box, and whispered, "I'm doing my best." The attic answered only with silence, but somehow she felt heard. The next morning, Thomas took a walk outside. It was cold still, but the ground was no longer buried in snow. Patches of green peeked through. He moved slowly, leaning on his cane, but he moved. Lena stayed by his side, letting him lead, watching his breath curl into the air like smoke from a candle. They reached the old oak tree. The one that stood by her window like a watchman reached out and touched its trunk. "This tree's older than both of us," she nodded. "It's seen everything." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe it'll remember this moment." They stood there together in silence. The wind whispered through the branches. Birdsong returned to the sky. Soft, hesitant. It felt like the world was beginning again. That night, Lena lit 3 candles in the living room. No reason, just to let the light linger. They glowed soft and golden. Their tiny flames danced in the hush of evening. She read to Thomas again. This time, her own story. Page after page, written in stolen hours and sleepless nights. He listened like he was drinking each word, like each line gave him breath. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, then said, "You didn't just save me. It became more than you know." Lena blinked. "What do you mean? You thought you were giving up your life for mine?" He reached for her hand, but really, you found it. She swallowed hard. "Maybe love's like that," she whispered. "It looks like losing something, but it's really becoming something." He nodded. "Write that down." She smiled, brushing tears from her cheek. "I just did." Spring arrived without fanfare. Not in a grand rush, but in small, almost invisible ways. The first sign was birdsong. Gentle, curious chirps outside the kitchen window. Then, the snow melted from the garden stones, revealing soft moss and sleeping flowers that stretched slowly toward the sun. Inside the cottage, life mirrored the season. Quiet healing, slow blooming. Lena took out the letter from the attic, in moments of gentle beginning. One morning, Lena found her father standing at the window, not just looking out, but truly seeing. The way he used to, the way people do when they have time again. The daffodils are coming back, he said softly. Your mother used to say they were the bravest flowers, Lena walked up beside him, because they bloom even when it's still cold. And that thought breaks my heart. But if there is one thing I know, truly know, it is that you are stronger than you think. He nodded. But I hope you remember that you were made from love, sewn together by a mother as hope and a father as quiet faith, because they don't wait for perfect conditions. They just trust the light. They stood there for a while, watching the world remember how to be green. That afternoon, she sat in her room with the windows open, a breeze moving through like a quiet guest. The envelope was yellowed, edges curled, but her mother's handwriting was clear. She opened it slowly, breath held, as if the letter might speak in her mother's voice. It read, My dearest Lena, if you're reading this, I'm probably not around anymore. I don't know what you'll be facing when this reaches you. You will face storms, you will walk through darkness. But I promise, Lena, even then, light will find you. And when it does, don't hide from it. Grow. All my love, ma'am. Lena pressed the letter to her heart. The breeze carried a scent of blooming earth, and for a moment, it felt like her mother was right there beside her, a hand on her shoulder, a whisper in her ear. You're doing beautifully. That evening, Thomas sat by the fireplace, a blanket draped around his shoulders, his eyes half closed in that soft, dreamy way of the very content. Lena made tea, chamomile and mint, and brought a cup to him. Smells like spring, he said with a smile. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the logs crackle, watching the shadows shift on the walls. Then Thomas spoke. When I was a boy, he began, I used to think love meant grand gestures, big speeches, loud promises. Lena looked over gently. But now, he continued, I think love is quieter than that. He turned to her. It's showing up, every day. Doing the dishes even when you're tired. It's working long nights and telling stories to keep someone from worrying. Sitting in silence without needing to fix anything. She smiled, eyes shining. You showed me that, he whispered. Every single night. Lena reached across and took his hand. You showed me first. They held hands in that firelit room, no words needed. Just presence, just peace. Later that night, Lena lit a single candle in the kitchen. She opened her notebook. The one full of scribbles, storylines, whispered memories, and began to write. Not for the diner, not to pay bills, not to keep anyone alive, but just to tell the story. Their story. A daughter, a father, a string of quiet sacrifices, a season of slow blooming. She wrote until the candle burned low, until the stars blinked sleepily through the window, and until her hands stilled. And as she set down her pen, she whispered to the empty kitchen. We made it. The season turned fully into spring. The last of the snow melted into the soil, and tiny wildflowers peeked shyly through the earth, as if asking permission to bloom.
Ow.
Birdsong came earlier each morning, and the sun, once just a pale guest, now stayed longer, warming the corners of the cottage, touching the windowsills with golden light. Inside, everything felt softer. Time no longer rushed or dragged, it simply moved. Quietly, gently, like the stream that trickled behind the cottage when the ice melted at last. One morning, Thomas walked out onto the porch without help. Lena watched from the doorway, her breath caught in her chest as he stood beneath the old oak, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sky. The tree had tiny green buds now, and a small bird had made a nest in one of the lower branches. Thomas opened his eyes slowly and whispered, I'm still here. Lena stepped beside him. You are? He turned to her. You gave me this. Every breath since that first treatment, every sunrise. She shook her head gently. You took those breaths yourself. He smiled. You gave me the reason to. Later that day, they walked into town together. Slowly, arm in arm, not far, just to the bakery. The baker, a kind man with flour-dusted hands, smiled wide when he saw them. Well, well, it's good to see you on your feet, Thomas. Thomas grinned. It's good to have feet again. They sat at a small table by the window, shared a warm scone and 2 cups of tea. Outside, children chased each other past puddles. The town had woken up from winter, and everything felt stitched back together. When they returned home, Lena checked the mail. Among the envelopes and flyers was a small letter addressed to her. Handwritten, elegant. She opened it slowly. It was from a small publishing house. They had read the short story she submitted months ago, the one she had written on a tired night after a shift, while her father slept soundly for the first time in weeks. They loved it. They wanted more. That night, Lena sat on the porch with her notebook open, pen tapping gently against the page. She looked up at the stars, so bright, so endless. The same stars that had watched her walk through snow, that had listened to her whisper silent wishes, that had seen her tuck hope into envelopes beneath the floor. Now, they shimmered like old friends. Thomas stepped outside and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're ready?" he said softly. She smiled. "I think I am." Later inside, she lit a small candle beside her bed. The flame danced quietly, its light reflecting off the window pane. She took out her mother's letter again, read the words slowly. "You will face storms, but light will find you. And when it does, don't hide from it." Lena closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm growing, Mum." The flame flickered once, as if in reply. Weeks turned to months. Thomas got stronger. Lena's stories grew wings. The garden bloomed wildly, like it had been waiting for someone to believe in it again. The cottage, once a place of quiet survival, became a home full of life. Evenings were spent reading aloud. Mornings were filled with birdsong and the scent of bread, and always there was love. Not loud, not showy, but steady, like the oak tree, like candlelight, like Lena. And now, dear listener, let this story stay with you. Let it curl up beside you like a soft blanket on a rainy night. Let Lena's love, quiet, patient, unwavering, remind you of all the things you've carried with grace. Let her father's slow return to the world remind you that healing is never instant, but always possible. Let the snow melt gently inside your chest. Let the light peek through. Breathe and feel how far you've come. You are held. You are seen. You are enough. Now rest and dream of spring.